Welcome to Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow. My name is Mariana Cordier and I am your host. Today's show will focus on looking back on the last decade, talking about the achievements and difficulties. Then we will focus on the hopes and anticipation for the future. To help review the past and look to the future, we have 4 expert guests. Valerie Irvin served 10 years on Montgomery County Board of Education, the County Council. She ran as gubernatorial primary candidate for Maryland in 2018, and Ms. Irvin's political career has been based on fighting unfair treatment. Jason Green in 2013 co-founded SkillSmart, a company that uses technology for job seekers to display their skills to potential employers and give employers the right tools to identify the exact skills they need. Prior to 2013, Mr. Green was in the Obama administration working on national voter registration. Grace Rivera-Oven, activist in Montgomery County for the past 30 years, working on issues such as health disparities in minority communities, minimum wage, domestic violence, and social justice. Ms. Rivera-Oven ran in the last election for Montgomery County Council at large. Devon Shaw is a partner of Shaw and Kishore. He is an immigration attorney. He is a leader in the Indian American community, as well as a strong advocate for the representation of the Asian American Pacific Islander community in the political process. So Valerie, we'll start with you.
Okay.
Thank you for agreeing to be in our first show.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's awesome. And so, you have had such a career in Montgomery County, and from Board of Election to all the way running for governor. And how do you see the county and the state from the past decade into what we're looking for or looking to the future?
Well, you mentioned that Grace had been a community activist for 30 years, but my real start in Montgomery County politics was about 30 years ago, and it started when I was a mom of young boys who are now adults and have children of their own. And so for me, when I look back on just the last 10 years, I see 2 things happening at the same time. A trajectory, especially of people of color in the county, going up, but at the same time, it's not going up at the right speed.
So what is it that you think is the impact? What is impacting this?
Montgomery County is a very interesting community, and I don't think it's as most people looking from the outside in see it. It's a community that's majority minority. It's got lots of sort of interesting geographic components
Yep.
to it. It's a huge county. It's 500 square miles. And it's dissected north-south and east-west, and these different quadrants have very different looking communities in them. And so
It has even different weather.
Different weather,
I have no
yes,
snow,
yeah.
and in Germantown, they've got 2 inches, and the schools need to close.
And so what's fascinating is that if you ever run for office in the county, you have to really understand the geography of the county. The first time I ran for the Board of Education, I ran at large. It was my first real look at how Montgomery County is more like a small state than a county. And so that is a challenge. And let me just say, 10 years, it's been many years later, but we're talking about 10 years now, from 2010 to 2020, this community has gotten very big, very fast. And I think what that's created is a real tension among the newer communities coming in to the county, but also older communities like Jason knows a lot about. Like, there are African American communities who have been here since before the Civil War,
and others.
Right, and so it's a community that is still striving to understand all its component parts, and because of that, it's been very, very difficult in this sort of upswing I'm talking about. So I think we have so far to go, but I think we have many opportunities to see some real change coming if we understand this community that we call home.
I think the speed that you're talking about is a really important factor. You think about 2010 to 2020 when this county became a majority minority community. During that time period, I was in the Obama administration working a lot around national labor policy. And of course, Montgomery County is the country in microcosm.
Right.
And one of the things I think is fascinating, Valerie talked about her time being on the Board of Education, is just conversation around the skills economy, but what that means around education. Is
Right.
this a community that, where everyone should get a 4-year degree, or should we get technical skills training? And one of the questions that I think often gets left out is, what is the definition of success in that model?
Right.
For the individual, for the student, is success getting a high-paying job? Is success the credential that comes at the end of that experience? And I think that it's really going to play out in a significant way in Montgomery County because it has this expectation around the way in which people are supposed to matriculate through their pedagogy.
And that goes into that conversation about student loans and student debt. I mean,
Right.
you
And it has a
know.
racial component to it
Right.
as well.
Well, to have change in this county, we need to get our citizens engaged. And 1/3 of our residents in Montgomery County now are foreign born. And to have them engaged means to have them politically engaged, have them register to vote, either Republican, Democrat, or Independent, and then have them actually participate in the political process. And that's not what we're seeing. So we're still seeing a lot of the old guard, so to speak, making the policies in the county because we don't have these new Americans engaged. And some policies that could help at the state level would be, same-day primaries, because we have new Americans coming into this country that don't understand our political process of 2 primaries.
Right.
Some of them coming into this country from socialist, communist countries where there's only one party, right? So they don't understand this primary process. And Valerie, as you know, being very active in the political realm, that when you go out to engage voters in primaries, you're going to look at the last 2 or 3 election cycles and see who voted, and let me reach out to them to come out and vote. And if they haven't voted, it's not worth your time or money potentially to try to engage them because you want likely voters. So it's kind of a catch-22.
A lesser candidate would have done it that way, but
Very
I'm
good.
just
Right.
joking.
Yeah.
That's a joke.
But,
But what
sorry.
you just laid that out beautifully. But what I want to say is that for those, I started out as a union organizer, and so the way I view politics is on the ground. And I know, especially in the community that you're representing, that you're talking about, we went straight to your community. And in any good organizing campaign, you're looking for where are the leaders in these different communities,
Sure.
and you try to go find them. And that's why I'm saying, knowing the community that is Montgomery County means you really have to understand who the new Americans are in the community and how to gain access to them and how to sort of we're all learning this together.
Right.
And
Yes,
can
we
I?
are.
And I'll leave you with this because I don't want to monopolize this.
No,
but
no,
you
no,
just
you're
laid
good. I'll
out.
tell you- I'll
You
cut
just
you off.
laid out the best. You just laid out a case here, and that is that we still have so far to go because we are a county that still has an old guard alive and kicking, and they control a
Right.
lot of who even gets their name on the ballot. Mariana and I have a story about that at the state
Well,
level.
I was
but,
going to
yeah.
mention to you, to me it seemed like when you ran for governor and there was the issue of the ballot, that there was, for me, it was the first time to confront the actual government putting the barrier in place for a minority candidate that was surprising. It was shocking because aren't we progressive Maryland?
Yeah, but really, were you surprised? I wasn't surprised, right? I think, and Valerie, you started, your activism 30 years ago in the Board of Education. And yet, when you look at that data for brown children back then, and then you look at the data today,
It's the same.
it's the same. Like, we have made literally no, we have not gained ground on academic achievement, correct? And so we need to really look in the mirror as a county and say, are we truly, what is it that is not working? Because something is not working. Because as you know, the budget, more than half goes to Montgomery County Public Schools. And now we're a majority minority, and most of the children are brown children in our school system. So you would think that we would, in 30 years, have made, incredible leaps and bounds in ensuring that our graduation rate is higher, that our kids are taking rigorous courses, but yeah, we're not. We're like stuck back in the past. So looking forward, I'm interested to have that conversation with community leaders. is unifying our voices. Going in that way. There's now a brown and black coalition that was formed, and I am so thrilled that there's an agenda there. But we see it with health disparities.
Sure.
We see it, it's the same thing,
With health disparity, data with health disparity also.
Exactly. But now we have numbers. Now we're getting data. It's not just hearsay, we think this is what's going on. And even with that data, right, the paradigm has not changed. Because the people who make those decisions are still the same folks in a sense. So how can we change that?
I think I'm really glad Jason's here because he's representing a company that's really forward thinking about how do you engage in all these different levels of the community about how do we get our graduates the skills that they need to go to work or go on to 2 4-year degree pathways. But I think that's really important because the school system has to partner up.
Well, right, and I think that partner piece is probably one of the most important pieces. You're talking about this coalition that's coming together,
Right.
and it can't just be a coalition on one side. You have to have a coalition of employers, of government, of individual taxpayers, and that's what we've really tried to do at SkillSmart is be a mechanism of accountability. When we're going to have these kinds of investments into a community that are going to spur economic development on its own is insufficient. What is that economic development going to do to ensure that the underserved population has access to what it needs, that we're providing pathways to educational opportunities, and most importantly, economic prosperity. And it's just something that has to have both sides at the table, right? That the opportunity comes at the same time that you have those community participants that can build meaningful pathways in that direction. One thing that, in hearing you talk, it made me think about just kind of a little bit about the history that we're coming from. And the importance of intentionality. You know I've been working on a film. We recently finished a documentary called Finding Fellowship, which was about the unlikely merger of 3 racially segregated churches in the community of Quince Orchard, which is now North Potomac. But those 3 churches merged together the night that Martin Luther King was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. When I was making the film, I thought, April 4th, 1968 is the most important moment in this story's history. In reality, it was April 5th, and April 6th, and April 7th, because it was about how can you be intentional about these ideas of community and respect, even at times when you may not want to like your neighbor, but you have to love your neighbor. And I think it's that kind of intentionality about building community in Montgomery County that we need.
And it's also about being very honest also as the leadership and doing the check and balance that you said and keeping those leaders honest about the true realities that the communities and their needs, right? Because many times we hear this is what you guys need and this is what I'm going to offer, but they forget to talk to those who are supposed to be getting those services. They forget to ask them, is this really what you need and this is what, And having those two-way communications, I think, is incredibly important.
Well, thank you for sharing all those in this segment, opinions and thoughtful retrospect of, nothing's much changed, I think is the theme. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back.
The first day stepping on the court, I couldn't keep up. That motivated me to step up my game. When I reach a goal, I set a new one the next day. And my next goal is to go to college. Mastering the court takes persistence. So does getting into college. I've got what it takes. So do you.
If you drive buzzed, it could cost you around $10,000. You'll face major legal fees, major fines, and steep insurance penalties. You could lose everything. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Nice. Run! Yes, go! Yes, yes, yes! No!
Oops.
Yeah, sure.
Let's go.
Moms everywhere are finding ways to keep kids active and healthy.
Works every time.
Get ideas, get involved, get going at letsmove.gov.
This is so cool, Dad.
Awesome.
This is so cool, Dad.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of siblings in foster care who'll take you just as you are.
And we're back. So Jason, I wanted to touch on your film was about a perspective on the history in the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as a future? What are the steps that the continuation of integration, the continuation of tolerance?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. One of the themes that we're hearing so far is that history is looking very much like the present. And frankly, one of the reasons why I wanted to make this film was because I was hearing this refrain over and over that we are a divided country, we're a divided people. And we haven't been this divided since 1968.
Yeah.
And so it felt only appropriate to try and sort of share this story of the possible. To say, let's look back at 1968 and let's find the story of 3 racially segregated churches coming together at one of our most divisive moments to say that this is possible. So when you think about Montgomery County and you think about the fact that a quarter of our residents are foreign born, that we are a majority minority community, we also have to recognize the necessity for intentionality. That if we want to continue to be this diverse, progressive place, that we have to sort of commit to those principles and commit to them every day. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me, is how important it is to sort of set that goal and drive towards it. My grandmother is one of the impetuses for this film. I sat down with her when she was 95 years old. She's
Wow.
a lifelong resident of Quince Orchard in Gaithersburg.
Wow, 95.
In 95, and she told me this story about my great-great-grandfather, and he helped start this little schoolhouse, one-room schoolhouse, still exists up in Quince Orchard. And I'm being the lawyer, of course, when she told me about it, that he helped found this school right after slavery. I was like, wait, why would he build a white schoolhouse right on the main drag in Darnestown? Surely there was a safer, more conspicuous way than saying, hey, we're educating black children here. And my grandmother stopped me short and she said, the black children in the community needed a school. So there was no public education for black children in Montgomery County then. But your grandfather, those other men and women in the community, they looked around, they saw a need, they were doers, and doers do.
That's
and I think
great.
that's what we need. We need that sentiment of doing in the county, to look around our community, see what needs to be done, and take action for the future.
So what do you think needs to be done for the future here?
Well,
with
I think
education.
In education, I think that we need to really work on creating access and opportunity. And I think that we need to define what opportunity looks like. It kind of goes back to that point that I was making earlier. What does it mean for people to have access to equity, right? Equitable opportunities, not just equality. Recognizing that
there's a
we're starting
difference.
at different places, and we
Exactly.
really need to be in a position
Right.
where we can have equity
Yeah.
across our
And you know, the rhetoric has gotten a little bit ugly with the whole redistricting of schools and
Yes.
identity. I'm sure it's, some of you have been following it closely, right? And it's too bad because I think that was a chance that MCPS missed, especially App County. And so that's a sense to me of the folks who are making those decisions are not really in touch with the demographics that they're teaching and the communities that should be involved and should be at the table, right? So I just have so much hope when I see you, because your generation, I feel, is the ones who are going to drive us to those changes. But I also feel that we're missing so many opportunities to teach our young people locally our history. It saddens me that I had to teach my son, who is an AP, taker and a senior at Clarksburg High School, about Wims Road, right? Who were the Wims family, and about Tobytown, and right? Why isn't that we're teaching a majority minority population our own history that I think is so rich in so many ways, right?
And it inspires. I think it would inspire the future generations
also-
to want to do more.
Yeah, and but then you also understand as different minorities, with either with the Latino, the Indian community, the Korean community, Chinese community, we all have those unique, experiences why we immigrated. But you also have communities that have been here, forever, and so it is like so important. I think it's a missed opportunity that we don't do that enough.
It's so funny you say that. One of the things that we did with the film, I partnered with Quince Orchard High School. Because the Quince Orchard Colored School, which was the school that my great-great-grandfather helped build, closely geographically situated. So a number of students ended up getting involved in this documentary. And because of the documentary, they learned about historic preservation, and I had them each interview an elderly member of the community. And so students who really weren't quite prepared to engage in conversation, to ask a question, hear an answer, ask a follow-up question, would sit with someone 80 years old, 90 years old, and sit and learn, be in their shoes and hear their story and sort of build these skills of empathy, but also, even if they weren't from here, even if their family wasn't from here, they felt more rooted to this place, right? By having a shared history and understanding your story, people felt more communal to that Quince Orchard community, which is this history.
And that's a perfect point in talking about the immigration that we have seen and the new Americans and their, how it started in the last decade. I think everything was great and everyone was pro-immigration, and now there's a lot of fear and not a lot of great news out of immigration.
Yeah, so everyone talks about the past as like the future, and I think in immigration, it's changed a lot in the last decade, right? We have gone with immigration being a nonpartisan issue, both sides of the aisle agreeing that immigration is good for America. Maybe in the way we approach it may be a little bit different, but we all agreed. We all saw the economic benefits of immigration. And if you look at the statistics, 40% of Fortune 500 companies were started by immigrants or children of immigrants. 25% of startup technology companies started by immigrants. So we can all see the economic impact. Unfortunately, what we've seen is the country, and actually many parts of the world, kind of divide up into two camps. It's an isolationist camp and a internationalist camp. And we see it even with free trade, where now we have persons in both parties that don't want free trade or don't believe in free trade. And that's happened with immigration also. And now we see a wall being built, and you can have a literal wall on the southern border, but we also, President Trump's also built up a virtual wall with immigration. He's delaying immigration benefits. He's scaring immigrants. Grace and I serve on a board together where we provide significant social benefits, clothing, housing, etc., to people of less means. And there are many new Americans that come there, and they're scared. They're worried because there's a new public charge rule. They're scared that ICE may show up at these facilities. And so for them to get the social services they need for housing, for clothing, for food, they are scared to come there. So there's been a chilling effect that's been placed on immigrants. And not only in the with those that are not in legal status, but also for legal immigration. And that's been, I think, going to be the biggest issue that our country is going to face in the next 10 years. And when I look at my practice for the last 25 years, and as we talked about education, I should be out of business by now. I really should.
Lawyers never go out of business.
Well, if our education system supply met the demand, I would be out of business. And what I mean by that is I do H-1B visas for tech workers, and the demand keeps going up. And our school system for the past 25 years I've been practicing has not produced enough engineers to fill those needs.
Can I follow up really quickly?
Really quick. You've got the last 10 seconds.
All I want to say is this is all really about narrative. The film you made is about a story that we tell about our history. And I think that for all of us, the best politicians anywhere are people who know how to tell a story, the narrative about themselves and about their community.
And that's the last word on the show. Yeah, the first and last. So thank you all for joining us this week on Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. And I appreciate the audience who's watching this show. Thank you for joining us in this first show. And I hope to see you next week.